She was sold before sunset, not with papers or handshakes, but with a nod and a bottle of rye tossed on the counter like loose change. The saloon was half lit, thick with smoke and sweat. Men laughed too loudly. Cards slapped the table. Somewhere, a woman cried softly behind a red curtain. She stood near the back, hands tied in front with leather cord. Dirt on her face. Hair limp. Eyes swollen not from tears, but from not crying anymore. The man who bought her didn't look at her. Not really. He was drunk. Loud. Boasting. Got her from her father. He grinned, teeth yellow, breath like spoiled. Meat. Owed me 2 horses. This one's more trouble than both. No one asked her name. No one asked if she agreed. She didn't scream. Didn't beg. She tried that once. It hadn't helped. Now she just watched the room like it was already on fire. And maybe, in some way, it was. Then the door swung open. Not slammed. Not slow. Just enough to turn every head. In the room, boots stepped in, dust-covered, heavy, measured, spurs quiet as breath. A man stood in the threshold, silhouette framed by dying light. Long coat, hat low, face shadowed. But every man knew him. They didn't speak his name not because they'd forgotten it, but because it stuck like sand behind the teeth. He wasn't law, but men stood straighter when he passed. Wasn't outlaw, but death followed him like a scent. He walked in slow, not looking for trouble, just not stepping aside if it came. The piano stopped playing. Cards froze mid-hand. He walked straight. To the bar, nodded once to the barkeep. Whiskey, he said, voice like a mountain just before it breaks. The bottle was placed in silence. No one charged him. No one asked. Then he turned, eyes scanning the room like smoke. They landed on her. Tied, dirty, barefoot, and something shifted. He didn't look away, didn't blink, just walked straight toward her. The man who'd claimed her barked a laugh. She's mine now, stranger. Paid good drink for her. The cowboy didn't stop, didn't even answer. He stood in front of her now, close, closer than anyone had stood in months. Her breath caught, not in fear, in recognition. He didn't touch her, didn't untie her hands. He just turned to the room, voice even, clear. She sleeps with me tonight. A silence spread, thick, charged. The drunk laughed again. That's so. What makes you think you can just? The cowboy placed a coin on the table. Gold. Real. Whole. The man. Shut up. She didn't move. Didn't know if this was rescue or another kind of claim. He reached for her, not her body, but the knot around her wrists. Untied it gently. Her skin was raw where the leather had bitten. He took her hand, and she followed. The room watched them leave, but no one followed. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, laced with wood smoke and dust. The kind of wind that stings the skin, but clears the mind. She hadn't felt it in weeks. He didn't speak, just kept walking, his grip steady but loose, like he wasn't pulling her, just giving her something to hold onto. She glanced once at his face beneath the brim, strong, weathered. A scar near his left cheekbone, faded but deep, like it had tried to tell a story and never finished. They passed the livery, crossed the frozen creek. Up the hill, just beyond the last lamplight of town, stood a small cabin. Nothing grand, but clean. A horse tied out front. A lantern glowing dim behind a curtain. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting her in first. She paused. No one ever let her go first. Not in years. Inside, it was quiet, warm. The fire had been left alive, banked low but breathing. He set his hat down, removed his coat, didn't touch her. She stood in the center of the room, unsure if this was a new kind of cage. He walked to the fire, added wood. The flames caught and lifted. Still, he didn't look at her, didn't demand anything. She lowered herself slowly to the edge of the chair. Her wrists throbbed. He noticed, walked to a drawer, brought out a small tin. Liniment, he said, voice low. Won't sting. He set it beside her and backed away. She didn't touch it, just stared at it, then at him. I'm not yours, she whispered, voice breaking for the first time in days. He looked up, met her eyes. I know, he said, and sat on the floor beside the fire, not near her, but not far. The crackle filled the space between them. She reached for the tin, rubbed the salve gently into her skin. It smelled of pine and something bitter. Healing always did. That night, she didn't undress, didn't bathe, just curled into a wool blanket by the fire, back to the room. She listened for him for movement, breath, demand. But all she heard was the creak of the floor as he lay down near the door. His coat folded beneath his head. He stayed there, guarding, not claiming. She cried quietly, not out of fear, but because it was the first time she hadn't been touched in months. And somehow that meant more than anything. The morning came slow, gray and quiet. She woke to the scent of coffee, not strong, but enough to stir her. The blanket still wrapped around her. The fire had died to embers. She sat up, sore in her ribs, her shoulders, her memories. He was already outside. She watched from the window. He stood at the fence line, back straight, steam rising from his cup. Alone, but not idle, like a man who had forgotten how to be. Still, she hadn't spoken to a man without flinching in over a year. She hadn't trusted one in 3. And yet, she poured herself a tin cup, sat at the table, didn't drink, just held it. When he came in, he removed his boots at the door, wiped the snow from his coat before hanging it. They exchanged no greeting. She said, finally, why'd you do it? He didn't pretend not to understand. Because you didn't deserve to be traded, he said. His voice didn't tremble. Neither did hers. No one said that to me before. He nodded once, then sat across from her, leaving space between them. She noticed his hands, scarred, not from fights, but from building, from earning. He didn't watch her, didn't study her, but there was a kind of attention in him that made her feel seen without being exposed. He nodded toward the tin cup. It'll go cold. She drank. It was bitter, real, like him. She helped clean the cabin that day, not because he asked, but because it felt like a place where things stayed clean if someone cared. He repaired a broken step on the porch. She patched a tear in the curtain. In the afternoon, they sat by the fire again. She asked, "You got a name?" He looked over, almost smiled. "Silas." She whispered hers. "Mara." That night, when she laid down on the floor again, he placed an extra quilt beside her, then returned to his place near the door. Before she closed her eyes, she said, "You sleep like you're guarding something." He didn't open his eyes. "I am." She hesitated, then whispered, "What?" The silence stretched. Then you, and nothing else. But it was enough. The first piece of her heart, long silent, stirred. Just a flicker. Like a spark waiting for wood, the days turned soft with routine. Not dull soft. Like something bruised that no longer hurts, just remembers. Mara swept the floors. Each morning, though no one asked. She opened the windows when the wind wasn't cruel and let the light in slow, golden. Silas fetched water from the creek, chopped wood, patched the roof. Neither spoke much, but silence had changed between them. It wasn't avoidance now. It was comfort. The kind people earn, not borrow. One evening, she stood by the fire, brushing her hair with slow strokes. He glanced once, then looked away, not because he didn't want to see, but because he knew she needed to be seen, not possessed. He carved small things from wood in the evening's birds, mostly, and horses. She asked why once. He shrugged. Hands need to do something while the heart thinks. She didn't press. But one night, she found a small wooden bird resting on her pillow. It had no paint, no markings, but its wings were carved wide, ready to fly. She didn't speak of it, only held it in her palm before sleep. Spring edged into the valley, softening the creek, loosening the ground. Mara found wild herbs, brought them home in folds of cloth. She cooked one night real food, not just heat, but flavor. He ate in silence, then said, "Best thing I've tasted in years." She looked up. He added, "Thank you, Mara." It was the first time he'd said her name aloud. It sat in the air like prayer. That night, she didn't sleep on the floor. He left the bed for her, slept by the fire, not out of duty, but offering. She lay beneath the quilt, eyes open to the low ceiling. She whispered, "You lost someone." Not a question, a knowing. Silas didn't move, didn't answer, but the quiet deepened. And in that silence, she heard the answer anyway. Yes. She rose early before dawn, stood at the door wrapped in her shawl, watching the stars fade. He joined her, holding to tin mugs. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder. Then her name was Elise, he said. Mara turned, eyes wide, not from surprise, but from the softness in his voice. She died in a fire 2 winters ago. I was supposed to be home that night. He didn't say more. Didn't need to. Mara reached for his hand. Just her fingers, barely touching. He didn't pull away. They stood like that until light took the sky back. Something was growing between them. Not passion, not need, but recognition. 2 souls who had been forgotten by the world. Finding each. Other not in thunder, but in the silence after. The knock came just before dusk. 3 slow raps. Then silence. Mara stiffened near the stove. Silas was outside tending the fence. She peeked through the curtain, then stepped back. It was him, the man who had bought her, the one who'd claimed her as payment. He stood on the porch, coat dusty, hat low, eyes too bright with something cruel. A riding crop hung from his belt. His horse still pawed the ground behind him, restless. She didn't open the door. She didn't have to. "I know you're in there," he called. "And I know you're with him." She said nothing, but her hands trembled. Silas returned moments later, saw the figure on the porch and stopped. The man turned. "Well, look who it is. Mr. Silent Gunslinger. Heard you were keeping my girl warm." Silas didn't answer, just walked to the porch slowly, each step measured, grounded. She's not yours, he said, voice low. The man smirked. She was. Paid for her with what her drunk daddy owed. That makes her mine. No, Silas replied. That makes you a thief. The man stepped forward, close now. She's carrying nothing but shame. You think you're gonna fix her with quiet and soup? Inside, Mara stood near the door, listening, earning. She opened it, stepped out, barefoot, eyes clear. She doesn't need fixing, she said. The man turned, surprised. You always were too proud, he sneered. She stepped closer. No, she said. You were too weak. His hand twitched near his belt. Silas moved then fast, firm, placing himself between them. The man laughed bitterly. You gonna shoot me in front of your woman? No, Silas said, but I'll bury you if you touch her. The man backed away slightly. You think she chose you? He spat. I know she did, Silas answered. And Mara, she stepped forward again. Between them now, she looked the man in the eye and said, I was never yours. Not the night you paid, not the night I left, and not today. Then she turned, took Silas's hand, and they walked back inside. The man didn't follow. He watched them, watched the door close, watched the cabin disappear. Behind it, and for the first time, he saw it. She was not the same girl he'd bought. She was a woman who had been given back to herself. And that was something no man could ever claim again. Word got out by morning. Small towns carry voices like wind through dry leaves, quick, scattered, impossible to gather once they move. The trader, bitter and bruised in pride, had gone straight to the sheriff. Claimed theft, claimed seduction, claimed she was property. Lost to a dangerous man. By noon, Silas was summoned. He didn't argue, didn't run. He just put on his coat, kissed the top of Mara's head, gently, his lips barely grazing her hair, and said, Wait for me. She didn't want to, but she nodded. The sheriff's office was too bright. Dust floated in sunbeams like smoke that refused to settle. The trader leaned against the wall, smirking. She was mine, Sheriff. He took her in plain view. Ain't that right? The sheriff was an old man, tired in the bones. Is that true, Silas? Silas didn't look at the trader, didn't look at the desk. He looked at Mara, just stepping into the doorway behind him. I took her, he said. Everyone turned, but not like he means. His voice was calm, steady. I took her out of the saloon where she stood tied like cattle. I untied her. I gave her warmth, safety, and silence. I never touched her without permission. I took nothing but her fear. The room fell silent. Mara stepped forward, eyes on the sheriff now. She's not a girl from the dirt anymore, she said, voice clear. She's a woman who chose to stay. The trader sneered. She's a whore in a cleaner dress. Mara didn't flinch. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something folded small. A ribbon. Blue. The same one her mother had braided in her hair before she disappeared one winter. She unfolded it slowly. This was the only thing I had when I was taken, she said. My name, my blood, my body all stolen or shamed. But this I kept. She looked at Silas, then at the sheriff. I'm not asking to be protected. I'm asking to be believed. The sheriff leaned back, eyes tired, lips pressed thin. He looked at the trader, then at Silas, then at Mara. And finally he said, a man who needs to tie a woman to keep her ain't worth a horse's shadow. He stood. "Get off my porch," he told the trader, "and don't come back unless you want rope." The man sputtered, cursed, backed out the door. No one followed him. Mara turned to Silas. He met her eyes, and in front of everyone, without shame, without claim, he took her hand. Not possession, not performance, just truth. The townsfolk watched, and not a single one turned away. For once, she wasn't just seen. She was honored. The town never spoke her name the same way again. Not with pity, not with spite, but with something quieter, like respect left on a porch before dawn. Mara walked through the market without her eyes on the ground now. She chose fruit with her own hands, spoke when she wanted, smiled when she meant it. Silas walked beside her, never ahead, never behind. One evening, a woman in town offered her a shawl, woven soft with prairie flowers stitched at the edges. "For your warmth," she said, "for your strength." Mara took it, not because she needed it, but because it felt like a welcome she hadn't known she was waiting for. At home, she began tending the small garden behind the cabin, her hands in the earth, her breath steady, the ground forgiving even when her steps weren't. Silas built a bench near the creek, not fancy, not carved, just wide, enough for two people who didn't need to speak to be understood. She joined him there most evenings. Their shoulders touched, their silences hummed. Some nights she sang again, not out of sorrow, but out of memory. He listened, eyes half closed, fingers brushing the hem of her dress like a man who still asked permission even after all this time. She kissed him first, soft, unhurried, like tasting a fruit long ripened. He didn't move at first. Then he held her jaw with his calloused hand, gently, and kissed her back like the world had slowed to watch. They made love as the wind whispered through the pines. Not fast, not desperate, but with reverence, like two people learning the shape of safety. When morning came, she woke before him, wrapped in his arms, wrapped in peace. She whispered, "I never thought I'd see the sun from a bed that felt like home." He stirred, didn't open his eyes, just whispered back, "Now you'll never see it from anywhere else." They lived quietly, but not hidden. They planted more, shared more. He carved toys for the schoolhouse. She taught young girls to sew their names into cloth. They never told the story, but people told it for them, with eyes kinder than before, with voices gentler than the ones that once judged. And when strangers passed through, asking who they were, the townsfolk answered the same, "That's Silas and Mara." And for the first time that was enough. Years passed, but nothing important changed. The cabin remained. So did the creek, winding gentle as always. So did their bench, now worn smooth by the weight of two lives choosing to sit together. Mara's hands no longer trembled when she braided her hair. She did it slow, each strand tight, fingers steady with the kind of confidence that doesn't need to speak loud to be heard. She planted sunflowers that reached the porch, hung herbs to dry by the window. Sometimes she still woke from dreams with her heart racing, but not from fear, from memory. And Silas would reach for her hand without a word, thumb brushing the inside of her wrist like a promise made each morning. They didn't have children. They never said why. But every spring, children from town ran up to their cabin barefoot and, laughing, asking for stories, for stew, for kindness. Mara gave them both. Silas taught them how to hold a hammer without fear, Sometimes the girls braided flowers into Mara's hair, called her Miss Bluebird because one of them once said, "You look like one soft and full of sky." She smiled when they said it, not because she believed it, but because they did. One winter, the man who once bought her died. No one mourned him out loud. He passed like fog, thin, unremembered. She heard about it while sweeping the porch, paused, didn't cry, just whispered, "You don't own even the dirt now," and let the wind carry it off. On the day the first snow fell that year, Mara stood by the creek alone, watching it freeze into thin lace over the stones. Silas came up behind her, wrapped her in his coat. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them had turned into language long ago. And when she turned to him, smile low and warm, he kissed her cheek. "You saved me," she said. "I only opened the door," he replied. "You walked through it." She took his hand, pressed it to her chest. "I never knew my name until you said it without asking for anything back." A hawk circled above them, wings outstretched. They watched it disappear into the clouds. And in that quiet moment, she knew she had been bought once. But now she belonged to no one, except herself, and to the man who asked nothing but gave everything. Since that morning, the wind never again felt like it was trying to take something from her. It only carried songs, soft and free. Would you have stood in silence to protect someone who no longer had a voice? Tell us what this story stirred in you. And if you believe that love begins with listening, subscribe to Silent Ranch.